Hey everyone, Effie here. I'm back with day 11 of our 12 days of DIY Christmas video series. This is the home stretch. We only have one more video left after this. So for today, I'm making 3 watercolored poinsettia cards. So let's get started with the first one. I am using our Poinsettia Garden 6x6 background stamp, and I'm just dusting on some anti-static powder onto some watercolor paper, and then I inked up my stamp with some clear embossing ink, and I'm just going to stamp my panel, and I'm going to use my Baron tool to help get a nice crisp impression. Once I've done so, I'm going to spoon on some gold embossing powder and heat the panel with my heat gun, melting all of that powder. And now check out that beautifully embossed image. It's very busy, but it's so fun and so festive. And once we add color, you're gonna love it. So I'm using Spectrum Noir's Sparkle Pens. This is their holiday pack. I bought this on Amazon, and I will link it in the description box below. So I'm gonna start off by painting the poinsettias using the Rudolph's nose marker. I start off by adding the ink to the inner petals, and then I take a clean water brush and blend that ink out to the outer edges of the petals. And I'm going to repeat this process until all of my poinsettias on my panel are painted. Before I move on to my next poinsettia, I'm just going to add some additional shading with the mulled wine pen that comes in the same marker pack. And then I colored in all of the poinsettias using the same technique. This panel is complete. Let's move on to the second card where I watercolored our poinsettia close-up background stamp with Ken Oliver Colorburst. So I'm just going to emboss this beautiful large image onto some watercolor paper. I'm using the same gold embossing powder that I used for that first card. So once this was heat embossed, I'm just going to pull out my Colorburst palette, and I'm going to start painting using the wet and wet watercoloring technique. So I started off by wetting the area first that I want to paint with clean water, and then I added some alizarin crimson color burst to the inner petals, and then I blended that color out with a clean brush. I repeated the process until my entire poinsettia was watercolored. I repeated the process with the lime green color burst to color in the leaves. And if you guys haven't heard, I'm hosting a craft retreat in March 2020 in Times Square, New York City. Registration is still open. There's a couple weeks left. Last day to register is January 5th, 2020. I am teaching 2 4-hour watercoloring classes. We're going to have giveaways. There's going to be a great swag bag, and it's just going to be a really fun time. I'll leave the link for all the details for the retreat in the description box below if you want to check it out. So let's move on to our third and final card of today's video. I use this large beautiful wreath image from our Poinsettia Wreath 6x6 photopolymer set, and I'm just going to partially emboss it onto my watercolor paper panel. After I poured on my Brutus Monroe silver embossing powder, I heat the panel with my heat gun. Then I'll just do some more wet and wet watercoloring with Ken Oliver Colorburst. I'm using the Alizarine Crimson for the petals, and then for the leaves I'm using Sap Green, and then for the berries I go back to my original color palette from that second card, and I'm going to use that Cerulean blue for the berries because I really liked the contrast against the red. There are different techniques that you use when you're painting smaller images because you don't have as much room to play around with the pigment. So I really just worked very quickly with this card. I even went outside the lines. I like to do that when I'm working with busier images. For example, in that first card using the poinsettia garden, that image is very busy, so I kind of went outside the lines with the greenery, and I'm doing the same for this beautiful wreath. So that's my one tip for this video. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to color outside the lines. Kind of work with your quote unquote mistake, because in the end you don't notice those imperfections. They actually go with the entire theme of your handcrafted item, and I kind of embrace it. So here I'm just adding some additional contrast by adding Terre to some of the holly leaves and blending some of the color outside the lines out. And this panel is complete. I'm going to set this aside to dry. And once all my panels are dried, I just took the largest die from our double stitch rectangles large die collection, and I cut all of my panels with that largest die, and it cut my panels into an A2 size piece of cardstock with stitching at the edges. Then I just added the sentiment. I silver heat embossed the sentiment on this card, and then I stamped and made a banner for the other two. I hope you guys enjoyed today's projects and video. I'll be back tomorrow with the last video of our 12 days of DIY Christmas video series. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because I update it weekly. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.